because surely political correctness is as severe a form of censorship as any. And feeling that fear every single day. And then I suppose they think to themselves, well, maybe that there is a way out. I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there.
November 20th, 2025. The throne room at Buckingham Palace had never witnessed anything like it. Queen Camilla's face crumpled as she watched her husband perform the most shocking abdication in British royal history, handing the crown directly to Prince William in an unprecedented ceremony that broke centuries of tradition. Security cameras captured the exact moment her composure shattered, tears streaming down her face as she realized her reign was ending before it had truly begun. What forced Charles to make this devastating decision? Why was Camilla completely blindsided? And what explosive secret about her past finally came to light that made this abdication inevitable? The truth will leave you speechless.
Waving to the thousands of people who are thronging the Mall, who have braved the rain and are here to witness an historic moment.
The secret meeting that changed everything. 3 weeks before that devastating abdication ceremony, a clandestine meeting took place in the dead of night at Clarence House that would alter the course of royal history forever. King Charles sat across from his most trusted advisors, his face drawn with exhaustion and something that looked disturbingly like fear. The document spread across his mahogany desk contained information so explosive that it threatened to destroy not just his reign, but the entire monarchy itself. "Your Majesty," whispered his private secretary, his voice barely audible, "we've confirmed everything. The financial irregularities, the offshore accounts, the systematic cover-ups. It all leads back to the same source." Charles' hands trembled as he reviewed bank statements showing millions of pounds mysteriously transferred from royal charities to private accounts, shell companies registered in tax havens, property deals that defied explanation. And, at the center of it all, Queen Camilla's signature on documents she had claimed never to have seen. But the financial scandal was just the beginning. Hidden among the papers was evidence of something far more sinister, a systematic campaign to eliminate anyone who threatened Camilla's position within the royal family. Phone records showing coordination with tabloid editors to plant negative stories about Catherine. Email chains discussing ways to neutralize Diana's remaining influence through her sons. Most damaging of all, recorded conversations where Camilla explicitly discussed her plans to clean house once Charles was gone, ensuring that only her supporters would remain in positions of power. The investigation had been triggered by an anonymous tip that arrived at Buckingham Palace in a plain brown envelope. Inside were copies of documents that royal security had thought were safely buried in private vaults. Someone with intimate access to Camilla's personal affairs had decided to expose everything, and the evidence was so comprehensive that denial would be impossible.
I'm completely hopeless at it. I was a really bad actor at school, and I've never been able to master the art of mimicry. But
Charles had spent sleepless nights reviewing the material, each revelation more shocking than the last. The woman he had loved and defended for decades had been systematically betraying his trust, using her position for personal gain, and manipulating the very institution he had dedicated his life to serving. The realization that his judgment had been so catastrophically wrong left him questioning everything about his fitness to rule. As dawn broke over London, Charles made the decision that would change everything. He couldn't continue as king knowing what he now knew about his queen. The monarchy's survival depended on swift, decisive action to preserve its integrity. Camilla would have to go, and since removing a queen consort was virtually impossible, he would have to remove himself as well. The confrontation that broke her heart. The moment Charles told Camilla about his decision remains one of the most emotionally devastating scenes ever witnessed within palace walls. It happened in their private sitting room at Clarence House, just after their usual morning tea, in a space that had always been their sanctuary from the pressures of royal life. What unfolded there would haunt both of them forever. "We need to talk," Charles said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made Camilla look up sharply from her morning correspondence. She had been planning a series of charity visits, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse around her. The stack of evidence sat on the coffee table between them like an unexploded bomb, and Charles watched as recognition slowly dawned in her eyes. "You found them," she whispered, her face going ashen as she stared at the financial documents. "Charles, I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like." But her voice lacked conviction, and they both knew that the evidence was too comprehensive for simple explanations. Bank records don't lie. Recorded conversations can't be dismissed. The pattern of deception was too extensive to wave away. What happened next shocked even Charles, instead of the defiant Camilla he expected. The woman who had weathered decades of public scrutiny and emerged stronger, he found himself facing someone who seemed to crumble before his eyes.
"I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I had come to rely so much."
The mask of royal composure slipped away, revealing a woman who had been living in fear of this moment for years. "I did it for us," she sobbed, her carefully maintained dignity dissolving completely. "Every decision, every move, it was all to protect what we built together. You don't understand the threats we faced, the people who wanted to destroy us. I had to fight back." Her justifications poured out in a torrent of emotion, each excuse revealing how deeply she had compromised herself and their marriage. Charles listened in stunned silence as Camilla detailed a shadow campaign that had been running parallel to their public royal duties. Payments to silence potential whistleblowers. Pressure applied to media outlets to suppress unfavorable stories. Even more shocking, deliberate attempts to undermine Catherine's popularity through planted rumors and coordinated character assassination attempts. The conversation stretched for hours, moving from Camilla's desperate justifications to Charles's growing horror at the scope of her actions. By the end, both of them were emotionally drained, but Charles's resolve had only strengthened. "I can't continue as king knowing what I know," he told her finally. "And I can't protect you from the consequences of your choices. The only way to save the monarchy is for both of us to step aside." The secret plan to destroy Catherine. Among the most explosive documents uncovered in the investigation were detailed plans showing how Camilla had systematically worked to undermine Princess Catherine from the moment she became a serious contender to marry William. The scope and sophistication of this campaign shocked even hardened royal insiders who thought they had seen everything in their decades of palace service. The plan, codenamed Project Gardening, in Camilla's private files, involved a multi-pronged attack designed to make Catherine appear unsuitable for royal life, while positioning Camilla as the monarchy's stabilizing force. Phone records showed regular calls between Camilla's office and tabloid editors, coordinating negative stories about Catherine's family background and supposed social climbing ambitions. But the psychological warfare went much deeper than media manipulation. Internal palace memos revealed how Camilla had instructed staff to make Catherine's early royal experiences as difficult as possible. Protocol officers were told to provide incomplete information about ceremonial requirements, setting Catherine up for embarrassing mistakes. Security arrangements were deliberately complicated to make Catherine appear demanding and difficult.
There was never a more important time for Action on Addiction to succeed. And I, for one, could not be more delighted to support such a special organisation.
Most chilling of all were the recorded conversations where Camilla discussed long-term strategies to phase out Catherine's influence. "She's popular now," Camilla was heard saying to a close confidant. But popularity fades. We just need to be patient and help it along. The recordings revealed plans to gradually exclude Catherine from major royal events, limit her charitable patronages, and even influence her children's education to minimize their connection to Diana's legacy. The campaign had extended to social circles as well. Camilla had used her aristocratic connections to create an atmosphere of subtle hostility around Catherine among traditional royal supporters. Dinner party conversations were steered toward criticism of new money influences. Society events were orchestrated to exclude or marginalize Catherine whenever possible. Perhaps most devastating was evidence showing how Camilla had attempted to drive a wedge between William and Catherine by feeding him false information about his wife's supposed complaints and ambitions. Carefully crafted lies designed to make William question Catherine's commitment to royal life and her genuine feelings for him. The psychological toll of this sustained campaign was documented in private letters Catherine had written but never sent. Letters that somehow found their way into the evidence file. In them, she expressed confusion about why she felt increasingly isolated within the royal family, why simple tasks seemed to become unnecessarily complicated, and why she sometimes felt like she was fighting invisible enemies. The financial scandal that exposed everything. The financial irregularities uncovered in the investigation painted a picture of systematic corruption that went far beyond personal greed. Over the course of 15 years, more than £12 million had been diverted from royal charities into accounts controlled by Camilla and her associates, with the money used to fund everything from luxury properties to political influence campaigns. The scheme was sophisticated, involving multiple layers of shell companies and offshore accounts designed to obscure the money trail. Funds would be transferred from legitimate charitable donations into administrative accounts, then moved through a complex network of financial institutions before emerging as personal assets. The paper trail was so convoluted that it had taken forensic accountants months to unravel the full scope of the fraud. But the money was just part of the story.
Since the 50s to 60s, we've made huge strides. Obviously, there's a lot more to be made.
Financial records revealed that Camilla had been using charitable funds to pay for political lobbying efforts designed to enhance her position within the royal hierarchy. Payments to PR firms tasked with improving her public image. Donations to political figures who supported her causes. Even bribes to silence potential critics and whistleblowers. One of the most shocking discoveries was evidence that Camilla had used royal charity money to fund private investigators tasked with gathering compromising information about other royal family members. Bank records showed payments to firms specializing in surveillance and information gathering, with specific instructions to focus on Catherine, Harry, and even Charles's closest advisors. The investigation also uncovered evidence of tax evasion on a massive scale. Property purchases made through charity-funded shell companies, then transferred to Camilla's personal ownership without proper taxation. Luxury goods acquired as charitable donations, but actually used for personal purposes. Even artwork and jewelry obtained through fraudulent means. Most damaging of all was evidence showing how Camilla had manipulated Charles's own financial decisions, convincing him to approve charitable expenditures that she knew were fraudulent. Bank statements showed his signature on documents authorizing transfers that went directly into accounts she controlled, making him an unwitting accomplice to her financial crimes. The scope of the fraud was so extensive that recovering the stolen funds would require cooperation from financial institutions across multiple countries. More importantly, the revelation that the Queen Consort had been systematically stealing from charities meant to help the most vulnerable members of society created a scandal that threatened to destroy public faith in the monarchy entirely. The abdication ceremony nobody expected on the morning of November 20th, 2025. Buckingham Palace issued a statement that sent shockwaves around the world. His Majesty King Charles will make a special announcement regarding the future of the monarchy at 3 p.m. today. No other details were provided, but the timing and formality of the announcement suggested something unprecedented was about to unfold. The throne room was hastily prepared for a ceremony that had no modern precedent. Unlike the carefully choreographed pageantry of coronations and state occasions, this event was stripped down to its essential elements: a simple podium, the ancient throne, and the St. Edward's crown sitting on a velvet cushion. The guest list was limited to senior royals, government officials, and a small pool of journalists sworn to secrecy until the ceremony concluded. Queen Camilla entered the throne room believing she was attending a routine royal announcement. Palace staff had deliberately kept her in the dark about the true nature of the event, following Charles's explicit instructions that she should learn about his decision in public, just like everyone else. Her confusion was evident as she took her designated seat, glancing around nervously at the unusually solemn atmosphere. Prince William and Catherine arrived looking tense but composed, having been briefed about what was coming just hours earlier. The shock on William's face when his father had explained the situation was still visible, despite his attempts to maintain royal protocol.
I think more shock and dauntingness was more the feeling I felt, but it was, the thing is, I think I was on such a high anyway, and so was Catherine about George, that...
Catherine sat rigidly beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, processing the magnitude of what was about to unfold. When King Charles finally entered, the silence in the room was deafening. He moved slowly, each step deliberate and final, carrying the weight of a decision that would change the monarchy forever. The speech he had prepared was brief but devastating in its clarity. He could no longer serve as king, effective immediately, and the crown would pass to his son William. But it was what Charles didn't say that made the moment even more powerful. No mention of health concerns or desire for retirement. No explanation of the circumstances forcing his hand. Just a simple statement that his time as monarch had come to an end, delivered with a dignity that somehow made the moment even more heartbreaking. The cameras captured every nuance of Camilla's reaction as the truth dawned on her. The initial confusion gave way to shock, then to a kind of desperate hope that this was some kind of mistake, and finally to the devastating realization that her reign as queen was ending before it had truly begun. The tears came slowly at first, then in a flood that no amount of royal training could contain. The crown that changed hands. Forever. The moment when Charles physically transferred the crown to William will be remembered as one of the most emotionally charged scenes in royal history. The St. Edward's crown, symbol of monarchical power for nearly 400 years, passed from father to son in a gesture that was both deeply personal and historically momentous. Charles lifted the crown with trembling hands, the weight of it seemingly much heavier than its actual 5 pounds. For a brief moment, he held it close to his chest, his eyes closed, as if absorbing the last vestiges of royal authority before letting it go forever. The silence in the throne room was so complete that the ticking of the ancient clock on the mantelpiece seemed to echo like thunder. "My son," Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this crown has been held in trust for our people for centuries. Today, that trust passes to you." William knelt before his father, not on the traditional coronation chair, but on the simple carpet of the throne room floor. The informality of the gesture somehow made it more powerful, stripping away centuries of pageantry to reveal the essential human moment underneath. As the crown settled onto William's head, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The young man who had knelt was a prince. The one who stood was a king. The transformation was visible and immediate, as if the weight of the crown had instantly aged him into the role he was now required to fill.
I think royal duty is extremely important. I think it's part of the fabric of what the royal family and any future monarch has, and it's something that...
But it was Camilla's reaction that made the moment truly heartbreaking. As she watched the crown pass from her husband to her stepson, the full reality of her situation became undeniably clear. She was no longer the queen consort of England. She was the wife of a former king, a woman whose royal status had evaporated in the span of a single ceremony. The sob that escaped her lips was audible throughout the throne room, a sound of pure anguish that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Years of fighting for acceptance, decades of building her position within the royal family, all of it undone in a single moment. The cameras captured her hand rising to her mouth in a futile attempt to stifle her emotions. But the damage was done. The world was witnessing the complete emotional breakdown of a woman who had lost everything. Charles moved to comfort her, but even that gesture carried tragic irony. The man who was trying to console her was the same one who had just destroyed her dreams and ambitions. Their embrace was captured by photographers, creating an image that would define this moment in history. A former king holding his heartbroken wife as their world collapsed around them. The public reaction that shook the world. Within minutes of the abdication ceremony's conclusion, social media exploded with reactions that ranged from shock to sympathy to outright celebration. The #sign Camilla Breaks Down began trending globally within an hour, with millions of users sharing their thoughts on the dramatic scenes they had just witnessed. The public response revealed deep divisions about Camilla that had been simmering beneath the surface for decades. Supporters expressed genuine sympathy for a woman who had faced unprecedented public scrutiny and had now lost everything in the most public way possible. "No one deserves to be humiliated like this," wrote one user whose tweet received over 100,000 likes. Whatever her faults, watching her break down was heartbreaking. But critics were equally vocal, with many pointing out that Camilla's tears came only after she had been caught, not out of genuine remorse for her actions. "She's crying because she got caught, not because she's sorry," became a rallying cry for those who viewed her emotional breakdown as manipulative rather than genuine. Royal commentators struggled to provide context for an event that had no modern precedent. The last British monarch to abdicate had been Edward V in 1936, but that abdication was driven by his desire to marry a divorced woman, not by scandal and corruption. Charles's abdication represented something entirely new in royal history, a king stepping down not for love, but to save the institution itself. International reaction was swift and largely sympathetic to Charles's decision.
In this purpose, I know that I shall be upheld by the affection and loyalty of the peoples whose sovereign I have been called upon to be.
Foreign governments praised his willingness to put the monarchy's integrity above personal considerations, while royal families across Europe quietly applauded his handling of what could have been a catastrophic scandal. But it was the reaction from ordinary British citizens that proved most telling. Street interviews conducted in the hours following the abdication showed a public that was shocked but ultimately supportive of Charles's decision. Many expressed relief that the monarchy had finally addressed long-standing concerns about transparency and accountability. The financial markets responded positively to the news, with the pound strengthening against major currencies as investors interpreted the abdication as a sign of institutional stability rather than crisis. The swift transition to William, seen as a more modern and relatable royal figure, was viewed as potentially beneficial for Britain's international reputation. The new king's first words. King William's first address to the nation as monarch was delivered just hours after the abdication ceremony, speaking from the same throne room where his life had changed forever. The speech he gave would be remembered as one of the most important royal addresses in modern history, setting the tone for a reign that would be defined by transparency, accountability, and renewal. "My people," he began, his voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances, today has brought changes none of us expected. But change, when guided by principle and purpose, can strengthen rather than weaken the bonds that unite us. The words were carefully chosen to acknowledge the crisis without dwelling on its painful details. William spoke directly about the need for transparency in royal affairs, promising regular audits of royal finances and new oversight mechanisms to prevent future scandals. "The crown belongs to you, the people of this realm," he declared. "It is held in trust, and that trust must be earned through service, integrity, and openness." But it was his words about his father that revealed the depth of his character and the pain of the situation. "King Charles made the most difficult decision any monarch could face," William said, his voice breaking slightly. "He chose the institution over himself, the future over the past. History will judge him not for his final act as king, but for the courage it took to perform it." The new king's first actions were as significant as his words. Within hours of the abdication, he announced the establishment of an independent commission to investigate royal finances and recommend reforms. He also promised regular parliamentary oversight of royal spending and the creation of new transparency mechanisms that would prevent future financial irregularities. Most symbolically, William announced that Queen Catherine would not automatically receive the title of Queen Consort, but would instead be known as Princess Catherine until she had demonstrated her commitment to the reformed monarchy through service and dedication.
Which is why I wanted to start a society-wide conversation, to hear what people across the UK think about the early years too.
It was a clear signal that the era of automatic royal privilege had ended. The final goodbye. In the days following the abdication, as the palace adjusted to its new reality, the most poignant moments occurred away from public view. Charles and Camilla's final departure from Buckingham Palace was captured by security cameras but never released to the public, creating one of the most private yet significant moments in royal history. Camilla's packing was overseen by palace staff who had served her for years, many of them genuinely moved by her obvious distress. The woman who had once commanded armies of servants was now reduced to carefully folding her clothes into suitcases, each item a reminder of the status she was leaving behind. The jewelry was the hardest part, pieces that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth, items that had become part of Camilla's identity as Queen Consort, all had to be returned to the royal collection. The sight of her removing the sapphire and diamond tiara she had worn to her coronation, placing it carefully in its velvet-lined box for the final time, brought tears to the eyes of even the most professional palace staff. Charles himself struggled with the practical realities of stepping down. His private office had to be cleared, decades of official papers sorted and archived, and the machinery of royal life dismantled piece by piece. The man who had spent his entire life preparing to be king was now learning how to be a former monarch, a role with no precedent or protocol. Their final night in Buckingham Palace was spent in their private apartments, surrounded by packed boxes and empty rooms that echoed with memories of what might have been. Palace staff reported hearing quiet conversation late into the night, the sound of two people trying to make sense of how their fairy tale had turned into a nightmare. The departure itself was handled with discretion and dignity. No crowds, no photographers, just a simple convoy of cars carrying them away from the palace that had been their home and the stage for their greatest triumphs and ultimate downfall. The symbolism was unmistakable. The reign of Charles and Camilla was truly over. The abdication of King Charles and the emotional breakdown of Queen Camilla marks a turning point in royal history that will be studied and debated for generations to come. This unprecedented event raises fundamental questions about the monarchy's future and the price of power in the modern world. What do you think about this shocking turn of events? Was Charles right to abdicate to save the monarchy, or should he have fought to clear Camilla's name? Do you believe Camilla's tears were genuine remorse or calculated manipulation?